it's a time capsule. It's a memorial to a lost time. And I think that what we're looking at in that whole area is the outcome of contact with an earlier, largely lost civilization.
Deep beneath Russia's remote Caucasus Mountains, scientists are uncovering something that defies explanation. Enormous underground chambers, strange magnetic distortions, and perfectly geometric shapes carved into ancient layers of rock. Recently declassified Soviet maps, wartime archives, and advanced radar scans all seem to point toward one astonishing possibility. Someone, or perhaps something, constructed a massive hidden megastructure long before recorded history began. What secrets could still lie sealed beneath the mysterious mountains of Kabardino-Balkaria? Join us to find out. The Forbidden Mountain of Russia. There's a place in southern Russia where compasses twist, GPS devices blink out, and the locals still whisper about doors that open into the mountain itself. Deep in the Kabardino-Balkaria Republic, far beyond the tourist trails and paved roads, rises Mount Khara-hora, a steep, jagged formation surrounded by thick forests and mist that rarely lifts. People who've approached it say the air feels heavy, that the rocks hum faintly underfoot, and that animals refuse to go near its base. Official maps mark it as an ordinary mountain ridge, but there are areas where magnetic instruments spike for no known reason and drones lose signal mid-flight. So what exactly is buried inside Mount Khara-hora? Let's begin with a deep dive into the geography of the region. The Kabardino-Balkaria Republic sits in the heart of the North Caucasus. This is a mountain system that stretches like a natural fortress between the Black and Caspian Seas, where Mount Elbrus, the highest peak in Europe, dominates the skyline, and Khara-hora lies roughly 100 kilometers to the southeast of it. The terrain is violent, steep slopes, deep gorges, and constant seismic activity. Rivers carve through limestone, creating sinkholes and tunnels that can collapse without warning. The climate is alpine but unpredictable. In a single day, you can experience snow, fog, and sudden bursts of heat from underground geothermal vents. Access is notoriously difficult. Military restrictions, combined with unpredictable weather, mean that much of this region remains unexplored. Geologically, the North Caucasus is one of the most complex zones on Earth. It sits at the collision point of the Arabian and Eurasian tectonic plates, which have been in constant movement, folding and uplifting rock layers over millions of years. So, most caves in the region follow these natural patterns, irregular, uneven, and scarred by erosion. But what makes Khara-hora so strange, according to explorers and early geological notes, is that some of the voids beneath it appear unnaturally smooth. Their surfaces are polished as if cut by tools rather than carved by water. In one account from a 1980s geological survey, a team described finding parallel grooves that ran perfectly straight for meters through solid basalt, something almost impossible for nature to form on its own. That report was never published officially, and the samples supposedly collected from the site later vanished from archives. When scientists today analyze magnetic data from the region, they notice small but consistent distortions around the Khara-hora massif. These anomalies might be explained by concentrations of magnetite, an iron-rich mineral common in basalt, yet some patterns don't align with expected geological models. A few Russian geophysicists have quietly suggested that the readings might indicate large cavities or structures of unusual density beneath the mountain. To understand why the mystery of Khara-hora resonates so deeply, it helps to look at the people who've lived in its shadow for centuries. The Balkars and Karachais, Turkic-speaking highlanders, have called these valleys home since medieval times. Their culture grew in isolation, shaped by harsh winters and the belief that the mountains were alive. Local tales are full of such retellings, like stone doors sealed by divine hands, of tunnels where voices echo back words that aren't your own, and of spirits guarding the black heart of the mountain. Some older villagers in nearby settlements still refuse to speak Khara-hora's name aloud after sunset. According to their stories, those who tried to open the mountain were swallowed by it, in phenomena we know today as earthquakes, sudden sinkholes, or magnetic surges, all common in the region. Some researchers believe the mountain may have served as a spiritual or ritual boundary. Some ancient legends describe a forbidden ridge, where metal sang when struck, suggesting the people sensed magnetic properties long before modern instruments existed. In recent decades, Archaeologists from Kabardino-Balkarian State University have continued to study the region's prehistoric burial grounds, uncovering evidence of complex social hierarchies and advanced metal casting techniques. However, no official digs have been granted permission to explore the khara-hora sector. Perhaps this is due to conservation laws protecting fragile ecosystems, but others quietly suspect the restriction has more to do with what lies underground. A handful of independent explorers who tried to reach the area in the early 2000s reported abandoned Soviet-era equipment and unmarked fencing, which they interpreted as signs of a decommissioned research or military zone, but this is yet to be confirmed. Adding to that mystery are the subtle environmental oddities reported by both locals and visiting scientists. Compasses often drift by several degrees near the lower slopes, small electronic devices malfunction, and birds change flight paths to avoid the area. Some hikers have described a low, vibrating hum, barely audible but strong enough to feel in the chest, that seems to come from the ground itself. Seismologists have speculated that the noise could be a resonance from deep earth movements or underground water flow through narrow channels, but the pattern isn't consistent with known acoustic data. At night, strange lights have occasionally been seen flickering near the summit, which could be due to piezoelectric discharges. These are small bursts of energy created when crystalline rocks like quartz are squeezed under stress. Whatever the explanation, Mount khara-hora continues to resist easy answers. It sits on the thin edge where logic ends and something older and still unknown begins. The descent that should never have happened. In 2024, Russian online forums erupted after a series of leaked satellite images appeared to show symmetrical indentations on the northern face of Mount khara-hora, patterns that looked less like rock fractures and more like the faint outlines of an artificial structure buried beneath layers of ice and scree. The images, which allegedly came from a commercial Earth observation satellite operated by a European firm, were quickly deleted from the hosting site, but not before they were copied and analyzed by independent researchers. Within hours, blogs and Telegram channels were calling it the biggest geological mystery since Dyatlov Pass. What the images seemed to show was shocking. Parallel ridges spaced at precise intervals, forming a trapezoidal formation roughly 100 meters wide, completely unlike any known natural feature in the region. Could this be the long-rumored doorway into khara-hora that local legends warned about? This sudden surge of attention revived an older, more disturbing story, the alleged descent of mountaineer and geologist Arur Gemikov in 2011. According to fragments of an unpublished expedition diary, Gemikov and two colleagues claimed to have entered a narrow fissure at the southern base of khara-hora while conducting a seismic study. They reported a steep shaft that descended nearly 60 meters into an underground chamber where they allegedly found walls of smooth basalt laced with metallic veins. One note described a faint, mechanical resonance when the rock was struck, as if hollow behind the surface. Gemikov's notes also mentioned patterns carved into the stone, geometric symbols that seemed too deliberate to be random. The group's last radio message, sent via a shortwave device, mentioned heat signatures deeper down before contact was lost for several hours. They re-emerged disoriented, and 2 weeks later, Gemikov's colleagues refused to speak publicly about what had occurred. What makes this story even stranger is that in 2015, Gemikov reportedly vanished during a follow-up trip to the same region. Local rescue teams found his abandoned tent, equipment, and personal documents, but no trace of him. Russian media, in covering the incident briefly, described it as a likely accident in treacherous terrain. But online discussions pointed out the flaws in this official account. His family claimed his notebooks were confiscated by authorities under environmental investigation orders. No official report was ever released, and his earlier field data from 2011 disappeared from university archives. Even now, locals insist that the site where Gemikov vanished has been quietly cordoned off by security patrols posing as wildlife rangers. 2 years later, in 2017, the mystery deepened further when Vadim Chernobrov, a well-known researcher on UFOs, led a small private expedition toward khara-hora to verify reports of strange magnetic pulses in the region. Chernobrov had previously studied the so-called Derbent anomaly, which was a zone of unexplained geomagnetic activity elsewhere in the Caucasus. His final recorded communication mentioned that the team had detected an abnormal energy field near a ravine below khara-hora's western ridge. Days later, The group turned back after one member allegedly collapsed with symptoms consistent with acute radiation exposure, though no hospital records were ever released to confirm this. Within months, Chernobrov died under undisclosed circumstances, and all data from the expedition, including photographs and sensor readings, were said to have been lost in transit. One of the most persistent modern legends tied to khara-hora involves the case of the so-called vanishing photographs, attributed to a Russian-American filmmaker named Mikhail Splashnov. In 2018, Splashnov claimed to have obtained access to drone footage shot by a foreign survey team that accidentally captured unusual geometric shadows on the mountain's northern slope. He allegedly uploaded still frames showing angular structures embedded in the terrain, again resembling man-made corridors or terraces. Within hours of posting, his website was taken offline for copyright violations. Splashnov later told an independent journalist that his files were remotely wiped and his cloud backups corrupted, which he interpreted as deliberate interference. No copies of these photographs have surfaced publicly since. After 2020, the khara-hora enigma entered a new phase. Advances in radar and satellite imagery allowed researchers to map the Earth more precisely, and some of the results were, once again, difficult to explain. A Russian geophysical report from 2021, briefly available through a Moscow-based academic repository before being retracted, described periodic low-frequency vibrations beneath the khara-hora massif. These vibrations, measured at depths between 3 and 5 kilometers, appeared too regular to be mere tectonic noise. The data hinted at vast hollow cavities or voids extending laterally across the mountain, a claim dismissed by the Russian Academy of Sciences as a misinterpretation of local wave reflections. Still, the authors of the withdrawn paper insisted that their equipment had been calibrated against known control zones, implying that the anomalies were genuine. One of the co-authors later resigned and refused further interviews, fueling speculation that the research had been suppressed. Meanwhile, residents from nearby settlements have continued reporting strange environmental changes. Shepherds speak of sudden bursts of static electricity that crackle through the air, especially during winter nights, and hunters describe faint mechanical sounds beneath the snow, like machinery turning very far below. Though these accounts sound fantastical, they align loosely with real geophysical phenomena known as microseismic vibrations, which can produce low-frequency noises under certain conditions. Yet, the pattern of reports, always clustered near the same coordinates, keeps scientists uneasy. If the patterns, sounds, and heat signatures aren't just natural coincidences, then what exactly lies sealed beneath Mount khara-hora? The mountain Moscow tried to erase. In the 1940s, khara-hora was involved in one of the darkest chapters in world history. As Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, the Caucasus became a strategic objective for both armies, not only because of its oil fields, but also for reasons that went beyond ordinary warfare. Among the German units that advanced into the region were operatives of the Ahnenerbe, the Nazi institute dedicated to studying ancient civilizations and supposed Aryan origins. Documents recovered after the war show that the Ahnenerbe did send researchers into the North Caucasus, particularly around Mount Elbrus, which they viewed as symbolically significant. While no official records mention Mount khara-hora by name, several fragments refer to a secondary mountain system west of Elbrus containing ancient caverns of interest. These reports, written in coded language, describe a site inaccessible without native guides and stone formations of perfect angularity. Historians remain divided over whether this refers to khara-hora, yet the geography matches almost exactly. After the German retreat in 1943, the Soviets sealed many of the high mountain passes and launched their own archaeological surveys, ostensibly to document wartime damage. Yet, files uncovered in the 1990s reveal a more curious motive. One document, now archived at the Russian State Military History Repository, describes anomalous subterranean cavities of potential engineering origin found during an aerial photogrammetry campaign in 1948. The images, taken by reconnaissance aircraft, allegedly showed discontinuous subsurface voids inconsistent with normal limestone dissolution. These findings were never published, and the report was marked Special Storage Only, a classification reserved for material relevant to national security. During the height of the Cold War, khara-hora's name appeared again. this time in the internal memos of the Soviet Ministry of Defense. From 1958 to 1962, parts of the Kabardino-Balkaria region were designated as restricted military zones, with access granted only to authorized geologists and radio engineers. Officially, this restriction was linked to aerospace communication testing, but field notes from that era hint at something stranger. One entry, written by a technician from a regional observatory, mentions radio interference of non-atmospheric origin recorded in the khara-hora sector. He described a repeating signal pattern that did not correspond to any known frequency modulation. Though dismissed by superiors as equipment malfunction, similar reports appeared in independent field journals several years later. Why would a mountain, with no strategic value on the surface, be subject to such tight control? Some historians suspect the area was used as a covert testing ground for early Soviet deep earth listening technologies, sensors designed to detect underground explosions or tunneling activity across borders. These instruments required stable geological environments, yet khara-hora was anything but stable. Magnetic interference and seismic echoes from its depths distorted readings, leading engineers to conclude that subterranean anomalies made the site unreliable. Ironically, these very distortions might have been what drew Soviet researchers back repeatedly. One of the most puzzling aspects of khara-hora's Cold War history is the map discrepancy. Several Soviet topographic maps from the 1960s omit parts of the mountain entirely, replacing them with blank grids or coded reference numbers. In later reprints, those blanks were filled with simplified terrain contours that do not match modern satellite data. When cartographers compared these maps to declassified reconnaissance images from the 1980s, they found mismatches of up to 4 kilometers in elevation markings, an error almost impossible to explain unless the data had been intentionally altered. Could the Soviets have been hiding an underground facility there? Some analysts believe so. Satellite photos from 1983 show an artificial-looking plateau on the southern face of khara-hora, possibly the remains of an access road or a collapsed entrance shaft. A few retired military engineers have since hinted that khara-hora may have housed a short-lived deep storage bunker during the nuclear arms buildup of the 1970s. However, no conclusive proof exists, and every surviving structure visible today appears eroded or natural. Yet, the fact that the region remains partially closed to civilian drone operations even now continues to raise questions. After the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Kabardino-Balkaria became part of the newly independent Russian Federation, and for a time, restrictions loosened. Climbers, surveyors, and amateur researchers began venturing into the khara-hora zone once again. It was during this period that the first modern accounts of geometric caves and metallic echoes re-emerged, feeding both local folklore and international speculation. But by the early 2000s, new regulations reclassified several high-altitude areas as environmentally protected biospheres, reinstating barriers that now serve both ecological and administrative purposes. Officially, these rules protect rare alpine ecosystems from disturbance, yet locals privately claim that certain trails are blocked by unmarked checkpoints, and that permits for exploration are routinely denied without explanation. In 2016, a journalist from a Moscow science magazine reportedly submitted a Freedom of Information request seeking access to geological data collected in the region between 1950 and 1970. The request was denied on grounds that the material contained defense-related coordinates. This reasoning baffled experts. Why would mid-century rock density charts still be classified? The journalist later received an anonymous warning advising him to cease inquiries into restricted terrain. It was around the same time that online footage showing supposed drone flights over khara-hora began disappearing from public archives, often under copyright or data violation claims. Even today, local authorities rarely discuss the mountain publicly. Officials from the Ministry of Emergency Situations occasionally issue brief statements reminding travelers that unregistered ascents are illegal, citing risk of landslides and unstable electromagnetic conditions. The language of these advisories is striking. Environmental warnings rarely mention electromagnetic hazards. This phrasing echoes the Cold War terminology used when restricted sites overlapped with military sensor experiments. If the Soviet Union truly uncovered something unusual beneath khara-hora, whether a natural formation, an ancient structure, or a failed scientific installation, the secrecy surrounding it has endured through every political shift. Is nature capable of this? For decades, explorers and scientists who've ventured near Mount Khara-hora have reported the same haunting detail: enormous slabs of rock stacked at right angles. Their surfaces are naturally smooth, as if carved with tools far more advanced than anything known to have existed in prehistoric times. Some of these blocks appear to fit together so tightly that a sheet of paper could not slide between them. Others seem fused by an unknown process, leaving no visible joint at all. Alongside these claims come stories of compasses spinning aimlessly, phones losing all signal, and electronic equipment shutting down without explanation. Hikers have described the feeling of a vibration under the ground, a low-frequency hum that seems to pulse through the air. The first serious geological examination of the Khara-hora massif took place in the early 1960s during a series of Soviet mineral surveys. Researchers identified the dominant rock as basaltic andesite, a dense volcanic material known for its high magnetic content and natural fracturing along straight planes. In simpler terms, when this type of rock cools from molten lava, it contracts and splits into geometric shapes, often hexagons or rectangles, creating formations that look artificially built but are entirely natural. Famous examples of this phenomenon exist around the world, like the Giant's Causeway in Ireland or the Devil's Postpile in California. In Khara-hora's case, the fractures are less visible because they've been partially buried by glacial debris, which may explain why early observers mistook them for cut stone blocks. However, supporters of the underground megastructure theory argue that some of these joints are too precise to result from random cracking. Drone footage from 2018 showed repeating rectangular outlines spaced almost symmetrically across one cliff face, a pattern that skeptics call a coincidence of erosion and lighting. Geologists counter that when vertical and horizontal fracture sets intersect, they can produce grid-like patterns that mimic masonry. It's a natural process called columnar jointing, and while visually striking, it doesn't imply human design. Still, even those who defend the geological explanation admit that Khara-hora's basalt appears unusually smooth in places, possibly due to glacial polishing or hydrothermal alteration, chemical reactions between hot water and rock that can leave surfaces unnaturally even. Magnetic disturbances are another point of contention. Expedition logs describe compasses veering off by as much as 20 degrees near certain outcrops, and handheld magnetometers have detected spikes in magnetic intensity. Scientists attribute this to the mountain's rich concentration of magnetite and pyrrhotite, two iron-bearing minerals that can distort magnetic fields. When aligned along fault zones or igneous intrusions, these minerals create localized magnetic anomalies. It's the same effect that confuses navigation near certain volcanic islands. But there's another, more complex possibility. Some researchers believe the distortion could be amplified by piezoelectric activity, tiny electrical currents generated when quartz crystals are compressed by tectonic stress. In regions where quartz and magnetite coexist, these currents can interact with magnetic fields, creating fluctuating readings that feel unnatural. In short, the mountain may not be hiding an ancient reactor or buried machine. It could simply be conducting electricity the way stressed rock sometimes does. The claims of distorted signals and electronic failures also fit this model. Strong electromagnetic fluctuations, even mild ones, can interfere with digital devices. Geological stress releases bursts of ionized particles, which affect air conductivity and disrupt GPS reception. To someone unfamiliar with these effects, the result might seem paranormal, a field where devices die for no reason. Yet, every measured anomaly at Khara-hora falls within the upper range of what's geophysically possible. Nothing detected so far violates the laws of physics, only our expectations of what a mountain should behave like. Still, not everything aligns neatly with the scientific explanation. Some petrological studies, those examining the chemical composition of rocks, have hinted at inconsistencies. Samples collected from Khara-hora's eastern flank contain higher levels of titanium and manganese than typical Caucasus basalts, which might suggest contamination from an unknown source or an unusual cooling environment. The problem is that these samples are few and poorly documented, with most drawn from surface rubble rather than the alleged subterranean chambers. Without verified samples from deep inside the mountain, no conclusion can be considered final. Satellite imagery analysis adds another layer of intrigue. Modern synthetic aperture radar, SAR, and infrared mapping have revealed subtle density contrasts beneath the surface, areas where the signal penetrates farther than expected, indicating voids or less dense material. This could mean hidden caves, lava tubes, or even collapsed magma channels. Some enthusiasts interpret these as corridors or chambers, but professional geologists caution that radar reflections are notoriously difficult to interpret without ground validation. Even minor differences in soil moisture or rock porosity can produce the illusion of hollow space. The same issue plagued early radar scans of the Egyptian pyramids, which initially suggested non-existent rooms. Could khara-hora's anomalies simply be the geological equivalent of a mirage? If there's one thing both skeptics and believers agree on, it's that khara-hora's structure is not fully understood. The mountain lies along a complex tectonic intersection where the Eurasian and Arabian plates collide, creating immense subterranean pressure. Over thousands of years, this constant compression has fractured the crust into intricate fault systems, many of which remain unmapped. These faults can channel groundwater, heat, and magnetic fields in unpredictable ways, shaping rock patterns that appear deliberate but are born entirely of natural stress. Some scientists believe that the precision joints and resonating walls described by explorers are merely the acoustics of hollow fractures amplifying sound waves, an effect known as seismic resonance. When the Earth trembles slightly, these cracks vibrate at frequencies low enough to be felt rather than heard, producing the eerie humming that so many have reported. One lingering mystery concerns the so-called metallic resonance, reported when striking certain walls inside the fissures. Sound propagation in rock depends on density and elasticity. A hollow cavity or change in mineral composition can produce metallic tones, even when no metal exists. Laboratory simulations show that basalt saturated with trace magnetite rings differently from pure basalt. The mechanical hum, described by Jemukov's team, could therefore result from sound waves traveling through magnetized stone, not from a buried machine or alloyed surface. That explanation fits the data, though it doesn't entirely erase the unease of imagining a mountain that hums back when you hit it. Science returns to the forbidden zone. In recent years, the mountains of Kabardino-Balkaria have quietly become the focus of serious scientific attention. What these projects are finding is not only reshaping local geological understanding, but also reigniting questions about whether something unnatural, something constructed, might truly be buried in the Caucasus. The North Caucasus Geophysical Observatory, established in the late 2000s, has been conducting detailed surveys across Kabardino-Balkaria as part of a broader Russian program to monitor seismic activity, geomagnetic variations, and underground water flow through the mountain chains. The observatory's publicly available data mentions frequent magnetic fluctuations detected near the Bezengi and Elbrus sectors, phenomena that have occasionally been described as short-lived compass distortions or unexplainable signal interference. Scientists have proposed that these readings could be caused by ultramafic rocks rich in iron and magnesium, which are known to distort magnetic instruments when concentrated in large veins. However, some researchers, particularly from smaller local institutes, have argued that the consistency and pattern of these disturbances suggest something more geometric beneath the surface, an array, they say, too regular to be entirely natural. A particularly interesting project under the Russian Academy of Sciences focused on subsurface tomography, the use of sound waves and electromagnetic pulses to scan underground voids. In 2021, a short summary published in Geophysicae Journal referenced a low-density anomaly extending several hundred meters beneath the Karasu Valley, one of the regions associated with the so-called Stone Gate legends. The report, however, offered a strictly geological interpretation, suggesting it was likely a system of collapsed karst cavities caused by underground water erosion. Still, the sheer regularity of some of the voids, especially one that appeared to form an almost rectangular chamber, sparked public speculation once local bloggers got hold of translated excerpts. Meanwhile, archaeological research in Kabardino-Balkaria has accelerated since the mid-2010s, though most of it is focused not on mysterious caverns, but on early Bronze and Iron Age societies like the Koban culture. Excavations near Verkhnaya Balkaria and Upper Chegem have uncovered remarkably preserved metallurgical sites, burial mounds, and fragments of tools showing a level of craftsmanship suggesting a complex social hierarchy. Researchers from the Institute of Archaeology in Moscow have dated these finds to between the 12th and 7th centuries BCE. While none of these digs point directly to underground megastructures, what makes them relevant is the recurring pattern of ritual objects, small bronze idols and stylized animal motifs found buried in unusual proximity to deep fissures and cave entrances. Some archaeologists have hypothesized that these fissures held spiritual significance, possibly seen as gateways to an underworld, or as entrances to forbidden domains. In the last few years, drones have also changed the game. In 2023, a small civilian research group calling itself Karasu Geolab began flying thermal drones along cliff zones and ravines where large anomalies were previously reported. Their findings, released informally online, included several areas with abrupt temperature differences, sometimes as much as 5 degrees Celsius between adjacent patches of rock. While the data hasn't been peer-reviewed, it gained enough traction that regional authorities briefly restricted drone flights over certain mountain corridors. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the next video for more exciting content.